Thank you very much, and I apologize in advance that you don't see me twice here. Both of the people who were supposed to make presentations, unfortunately, were not able to join us. This particular part of the project is being done by the PhD candidate, Angela Peck. She's momentarily as you can see, and today is a very busy day of classes, so she was not able to be with us. In this particular part of the project, we are focusing on developing a tool that will put together the work of the other groups in the form of trying to integrate different impacts and also allow for the experimentation with different adaptation options analysis. And all of this is being done through the introduction of the kind of replacement for traditional risk analysis that we named resilience and quantified in a particular way. I'll say a few words about that to kind of bring those who didn't participate earlier in this presentation to speak. And the purpose of today's presentation is actually to demonstrate where we are at this moment with the development of the tool. There are some kind of links between risk management and climate change adaptation, sustainable development. This idea of resilience, I think, is being introduced by the social sciences and quite often used. And I think this is pretty much the first attempt to quantify somehow this measure of resilience, and not only quantify, but use through the implementation of the systems approach, especially simulation, use this resilience as a tool to help us deal with various options, adaptation options, compare them, and basically learn more how they can be implemented and how they affect the resilience of the community. This is my key motivation, and what you see is the picture of the city of Hoboken during the Sandy event. At the bottom you see the progression of the event, basically surge. The Stevens Institute Exomic Laboratory at the university developed this particular tool. As you can see, it's simulating basically the impact of Sandy flooding, and throughout the event in a dynamic form demonstrates the impact of this particular event. This was done after the Sandy, and those who were in attendance during this presentation said, this is great, but unfortunately you are so far. We would like to have this before the event. We would like to have it in the form to tell us where and when is this going to happen. So it's pretty hard and very difficult to have something like that. But I took it as a challenge and motivation to propose for our project to develop something that will kind of build on this idea, but being used in a kind of simulation or in simulation form to help us analyze various adaptation options. Just quickly to move you from this concept of risk to concept of resilience, this will be the traditional way how we're looking into impacts of climatic change. The picture on the left is showing the work being done for the City of London, where we assess the impact of the critical municipal infrastructure due to the climate change caused flooding. And the picture on the right is a product of the tool developed by the Insurance Bureau of Canada, MRAT. It's called Municipal Risk Assessment Tool, based on the methodology that we developed at Western, and being kind of developed for the use by all municipalities across Canada who are interested to work with the Insurance Bureau in adopting this particular tool to continue assessing risk. So these are very useful products, but they have a particular characteristics. Like what you see is a static map. It's a map that kind of assesses the risk with a particular, return period, and obviously the consequences of this risk focused on what was kind of considered in this part of the general equation. That can be useful, But I think when we are looking into disaster events, it is for the purpose, let's say, of emergency management, very important to understand how this disaster event proceeds. And we immediately kind of see the consequences. Where are these consequences occurring in space and time, and adjust our response to that. So this idea of the static map is being kind of extended to dynamically in time and space try to model this resilience and use in our project as indicated earlier. The integrative part of this definition that we adopted is to look at the key four sectors where the physical environment, constructed and actual, is linked to governance network, institutions, organizations, to kind of social dynamics in the form of demographics, human capital, and also economics or metabolic flows in the forms of production, supply, and consumption chain. So what we are trying to kind of give to this resilience is the multiple dimensions of the various impacts that disasters can introduce in particular location. The resilience is generally defined here as a basically ability of the system to minimize the chains of shock, to absorb the shock first and recover quickly after the shock. And can be used, to kind of reduce the failure probabilities, consequences, and time of recovery. So we are utilizing the generic definition in a quantitative form to implement it through the system simulation tool that will integrate all these different impacts and give the response of the various adaptation options, adaptation scenarios that will be represented inputs into these simulation tests. I'm warned by that not to use mathematics, so forget all the creations that are going to be here. I just would like to actually say what are the basis of the quantitative definition or quantitative measure of resilience. We are utilizing something that's known as the system performance, and if you can quickly see this particular graph, system performance may be, let's say, a loss of business during the disaster event. The flood event here, this is the state, the current state of the work or business, and due to the, let's say, flooding that will occur over a period of time, you have some kind of loss, or with the progression of the event, some kind of recovery period, and we may have, three different potential options. One is to come back to the initial state, another one to come to, better or higher preparedness level or performance level, and another one never actually recover to the initial state. So this is the kind of key basic idea in this quantitative definition system performance. The beauty of this kind of system performance measure is that we can utilize various units and introduce different kind of aspects of resilience. We are, for example, dealing with the physical aspect that are showing the extent of inundation due to the flood or sea level rise. We are talking about health in the form of the number of people being affected by a particular type of disease or injuries. Economic, social, and you will hear more from the colleagues who are working in these areas, what are the different inputs that are going into this integrated measure of resilience. So in order to kind of combine now the area under the water and number of people being injured or number of beds in the hospitals and let's say the particular measure of economic consequence, we need to do some manipulations. And this is the place where the manipulations are done to kind of first get rid of the units or normalize this, then put that together through different ways of combining the impact, and at the end arrive at a single value of resilience that is basically, again, changing in time and space. In order to deal with adaptive capacity, we decided to follow some research that comes from the UBC, and the student of Professor Chen is here. That work was initiated in the area of earthquakes, where these so-called the 4 Rs are used as a way of trying to quantify the system adaptive capacity through robustness, redundancy, resourcefulness, and rapidity that are measuring kind of different ways how the system response. Robustness is kind of telling us, what are the elements that will kind of be required to withstand this disturbance, redundancy, the extension to which these elements exist that are replaceable, resourcefulness, ways of organizing, recognizing, responding, rapidity, the time that's required to respond to the disturbance system. This was the first, this is where we ended up when we were here for the first time, the kind of demonstration of the concept, or proof of the concept with the temporal simulation of the resilience measure. What you see here is a very simple example of the number of injured people due to a particular event. Adaptive capacity represented with two different options of number of doctors, for example, being available in the hospital that are accepting injured people. And as a consequence of these two options, we have resilience calculated over the period of time of the disaster event, where you can see that these two options are giving the different value of resilience. So that was a kind of idea to prove the concept that there is a way how the adaptive capacity affects the resilience, and that we can kind of nicely simulate this in time, and basically we can immediately respond by adjusting or adapting to the changing conditions. Now I'm coming to why we are here today, to tell you how we are expanding and what we have done between our last meeting and today. What we completed up today is to extend the simulation concept to include the change in space. And it was very demanding, and now the idea of the temporal simulation needs to be implemented at different locations in space because disasters are affecting and have this kind of spatial, very important spatial aspect. When we are talking especially about flooding, sea level rise, they're all kind of events that are creating set of impacts in space. The team that was working on this is myself, Angela, and we had a guest student, PhD student from Austria, Christian, who is working on his PhD from Salzburg on a different topic, but utilizing actually the same ideas. And it was a very interesting international kind of opportunity to collaborate and develop some ideas together and test them on two different problems, within two different problem domains. We were coupling this temporal system dynamic simulation with the geographic information systems in order to bring the simulation in space. The purpose was to capture both spatial and temporal dynamics of the resilience measure. First version where we are right now is we have again the proof of concept that's available. We are serving other three teams in a form that we are developing methodology and transferring this methodology that they can apply in their own locations. So some of this work is more generic than Vancouver, and it was done on purpose that we can share with other members of the team, and then we will be focusing our work, continue our work only utilizing the data for Vancouver and completing this work. These are technical kind of terms here. We needed to use some kind of programming arrangement, allow for the communication between the tools that are performing this temporal dynamic simulations with the spatial tool, and that required kind of coupling with the special kind of codes that can kind of work together with these tools. So on one side you have a model that does calculate the change of resilience in time. On the other side now we have a map that is considering each pixel of this map as one point in time where this calculation in time is being done. If I can kind of illustrate that, you have a kind of space, and this is a progression in time, and let's say you have a flood hitting somewhere here, then the impacts will be kind of changing with the progression of the flood, and these impacts are now being considered to take all these different 5 dimensions: health, social, physical, and integrated in the measure of resilience. And then resilience is the shade of red that you see here, being basically representing the map that is a dynamic map in time. This is what we have done to test this. We now try to link the temporal simulation with the space and the tons of spatial information is integrated from inundation in different time intervals to population density, road networks, location of critical infrastructure, and so on. For this very simple purpose of simulation and basically proof of concept, we located two hospitals here. This is the river, this is how the flood kind of comes. And on this slide you will see the outcome of now this temporal and spatial simulation. Can someone come to the first? This is now the calculation of the resilience. This is time. This is now the space. These are the two hospitals. The dark blue is illustrating higher level of resilience, closer to the river, a lower level of resilience. The point being that many of the roads are being flooded, and therefore the access of those who are located in this location is prevented, and you see how this is kind of changing in time. This is just to really prove the concept. This is not a realistic example at all, but something like this will be now developed in the full scale and a very detailed spatial resolution for the city of Vancouver. We are at the point that we are now trying to assemble the information that's required to do that. Angela, she's spending a semester in Vancouver and will be using this site, taking some courses at UBC. Also, time to communicate with many of you and see what type of information is available and where, and how can we get this information in order to develop this model for the city of Vancouver. One of the two key inputs that we are currently trying to resolve are the kind of hydrologic and hydraulic modeling that will be linked to various climate scenarios and allow us to first obtain the physical impact, basically the extent of inundation and interaction between the sea level rise and the floods that may come from the river or precipitation. And then this hydrologic input will be processed in a traditional way through the hydraulic modeling tools to give us the kind of depth of water, and that will be then combined with the kind of all other social, economic, and other health information to give us the impact that will be integrated into a single measure of resilience. The outcome, we see actually two versions of this model, or these two. One will be so-called the short term and allow us to deal with the events that are on the short term, like floods that may occur on a kind of weekly time scale with the time steps of hours or days. And another one, long term, like the sea level rise, that will deal with the time horizon of decades and yearly time step that can, follow the development of the sea level rise. We will be kind of looking how these two things physically are combined, so that you have a short-term simulation of the particular flood events under, different levels of the sea level rise. So in the number of simulation scenarios and analysis that will be done with the tool, at the end we will be having some of that will combine the use of these two. Immediate goals are to, by the end of this month, document this integration and provide this to our teams. I'm currently editing the technical report, and the example that I did show will be the example to be shared with other teams. We are going to provide input in this annual report that we have to prepare for April, and Angela will continue work within Vancouver to collect all the necessary information for the development of the Vancouver model. Longer term goals that what I foresee to be like a year from now will be to kind of have the working version of the Vancouver model that will be able to kind of test some of the adaptation ideas as a basically draft ideas to help us then start the dialogue of developing the broader set of adaptation scenarios that can be analyzed with the tool and produce some output or recommendations that will be documented at the end. For now, we succeeded disseminating the results in a various form. We have one paper that kind of introduces this concept of quantitative concept of resilience being published in the British Journal of Environment and Climate Change. We have another paper that deals with this spatial idea that's being currently under review and in environmental modeling and software. We have one technical report, detailed technical report available on our website that deals with the temporal simulation, and the second one that will put them together, and it will be available by the end of this month. We had a number of presentations, 5 invited, 2 keynote presentations, and 1 presentation that will be in April at the conference that is involved with. I would like to say, if you see that I'm very often asked to talk about this, and I'm talking to very different groups, and it is amazing how much interest this kind of approach will generate, and potential actually for application in very, very different fields. Many of the insurers are tremendously interested, especially after this focus of insurance on water and water damage, and they are finding, this idea of representing the risk in this way and modeling risk or resilience in this way quite attractive. Thank you very much.
Don't go anywhere. You better do Q&A.
I'm buzzing exactly 20 minutes.
Yes, that, by the way, was fantastic. Yes, I didn't have to wave or anything. So, questions or comments for about but Angela, Murray?
Yeah, 2 questions. So, one is the model going to be created for the city of Vancouver?
Yeah.
Okay.
Metro.
Or Metro Vancouver.
Metro.
That's the
The
boundaries.
region.
Yeah, we are accepting the same, we are dealing with the same boundaries in all aspects of our project. So
I think you've got to change the title then, because Vancouver for all of us means Vancouver,
Sorry.
not.
So it should say Metro Vancouver.
I know what I'm saying in the published stuff too. I was noticing it says
It just
Vancouver
says
all the
Vancouver.
time.
because you see, we are referring to cities, and when we in this even publications we are talking about these 4 cities. We always it's Vancouver, Bangkok,
And actually in Manila, it's the same thing. It's big. It's so many different pieces under one metropolis. So
Just when it's published,
I got you. Yeah.
politicians understand that.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll do that. We'll do that.
Okay, then that was like, because my second comment or question was, what unit of impact are you looking at? Because in Metro Vancouver, it's complex, it's sea level rise, it's springs like freshet, so is that, are you covering those different changes? Like,
Yes.
the impact? Okay.
Yeah, we are actually focusing on 2 kind of key impacts. One is the sea level rise, the slow and long term. This is why I was talking about this long term simulator. Another one will be the flooding or the climate change caused flooding.
So the freshet flooding. Okay, and so that will be place specific because that won't affect certain parts of the project. Okay.
Yeah.
The impact, the propagation of impact in space will be simply related directly to the type of impact or type of.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Great, thank you.
Okay, Murray?
Well, I wanted to start by commending you and your team on the conceptual framing and the implementation of the resilience simulator. It's a really great piece of work. My question had to do with the long-term simulator. Clearly, we're looking at events, physical events that are playing out in the future over decades.
Yes.
And while that's happening on the ground, we know the built environment and patterns of human settlement will be changing drastically, as Gord reminded us has happened over the last 60 years. Do you envision a capacity to look at the changing landscape as part of the long-term simulator?
Everything will depend on the kind of available information. Yeah, we were planning to incorporate the change in the land use because it's really becoming essential over such a long period of time. So we will be relying on the available information, either the planning documents that different municipalities have, and to incorporate that. We already did the historical analysis. So we look at the historical data in the change in the land use. So we have a pretty good understanding what was happening in the up to now. But we wouldn't dare to extrapolate from there. We would like actually much more direct input of different municipalities in order of what they are planning, what they are seeing, and how they are seeing that to affect the land use change.
some of us already have our systems already modeled physical, in which case, would you be wanting that so that you don't reinvent the wheel? Like, I mean, we already have very detailed models of how to precipitate, like tidal events, what happens, precipitation events, the interfaces, Fraser River freshet, you name it. We know how it's going to already affect our physical environment.
Yes.
So
Yes,
you know,
I
it's
want
up to
that.
you.
I want that question.
Yeah, and even
Yeah,
casino overrush,
the-
Vancouver's doing the same thing, right?
Yeah, but the point is we will be really integrating all these different
Okay.
aspects together, but I would like to see what we have, because,
Okay.
you know, it will be very important for us that on the total spatial scale and also the temporal scale that we are considering, that we cover, and we generate the results that will be,
They're very
that will
similar
be
to what,
comparable.
okay, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
Harrison?
In terms of an output, so you run your model and you get an output which gives you an idea of resilience over time for those different factors, health and economics, or is it overall?
It will give you overall resilience, and it will give you individual for these different we are considering 5 different factors.
So I'm trying to picture, so it will tell you over time where you're lacking resilience.
Yes.
In after.
It will give you the level, exactly the level of resilience, and it will be, the output is going to be this kind of dynamic, like you will have a dynamic map that may identify, like in red, different locations where, in response to a particular disturbance or disaster, the system will show the low level of resilience. Or we can simply print in, let's say, 2020, 2050, 2075, 4 different maps that are going to show you the results in this particular time.
Okay.
Moments.
And so say I find a red hotspot in a certain area, will I understand whether it's a vulnerable population that is making that show up, or whether it's a road infrastructure? Or?
Yes. The answer, this is why various maps will be generated, but only based on these 5 different dimensions of the resilience. Methodologically, there is no limit. If we consider other impacts, we can very easily expand or reduce. But for these different 5, you will have a direct answer to tell you, what is contributing the most to the overall resilience. Is it the health impact? Is it the economic consequences of these locations and so on?
Thanks.
The point is, we would like to use now these simulations to come up with adaptation ideas and strategies. So our team, or we will be working together, who are developing these adaptation strategies, will give us an opportunity to kind of re-simulate the same kind of events now with the particular adaptation options in place, and then you compare the resilience. So the resilience will be serving as a kind of measure to help us assess what will be the best way to go.
Right, that's fantastic. I think there's a gap there. So. Great.
We are
Okay,
trying-
so I've got Angela and then Steve, and then we've got to move on to the next presentation, and there will be an opportunity for group discussion. So please record any questions if they come up where you haven't had time to ask. Angela?
Just, I guess, wondering about, in terms of land use, your baseline year, and then are you also going to be speaking with folks like the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, the province actors, because there's a lot of assets, roads, port, rail, that would, that we as municipalities, we don't get to model that because it's not our data, so that would be a great asset.
That's our intention.
Oh,
We
okay.
are kind of trying
Good.
to build the contacts with, really different levels, and basically everyone who is doing anything that provides the inputs that affect this calculation will be a good source, at least for establishing some dialogue in order to find out what type of information is available that we can give. I am sure that within next 2 years we cannot solve all the problems and incorporate all the possible factors and data that you have, but at least you will have a tool that can be basically adopted by you later on with additional information that can be available. So this tool, the outcome of our project is public, and this tool will be available for the municipalities.
And so the baseline land use will that be 2013 or 2014 for what you're looking at?
Yeah, but that's going to be, we are still kind of discussing,
Okay.
because we all have to use the same
Yeah,
same
exactly.
baseline. and you know, this is coming at the end, kind of integrating all these different needs. So we have to have the same, you know, starting point in time.
Yeah, makes sense. Steve?
I think you already answered it. My question was, will it be possible to introduce management options or management strategies and then re-simulate?
That's the whole idea.
Great, okay, thank you very much, Angela. I guess
Just following from what Steve, so Steve said at the end, is supposing it's always said, but I don't mean inside message. This is a tool that says, well, if you do this, what will happen? You can rerun it, rerun it, rerun it.